The U.S. President Donald Trump has told U.S. media outlet Axios that he warned Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu that Israel may be fighting alone if he goes back to war with Iran. Axios quoted Trump as saying, "Bibi, you better be careful or you will be on your own very soon." But both Iran and Israel say that they have paused attacks against one another after they launched a series of strikes. It was the most serious escalation since the ceasefire came into effect in April. Iran's military says if Israel continues military operations against Lebanon, it will retaliate. Juliet Iger reports.
A wave of Iranian missiles fired towards Israel, testing an already fragile ceasefire. Tehran says the attacks are a direct response to Israel's ongoing military assault on Lebanon, a campaign it accuses the US of supporting.
The US is directly responsible. They are party to the ceasefire negotiations. Therefore, any event or any act in violation of the ceasefire, be it through the interception of vessels, the targeting of southern Lebanon by Israel, or any other event, will cause the United States to be directly responsible for the escalation in the region.
Israel launched a wave of retaliatory strikes. Initial attacks targeted areas including the capital Tehran, Tabriz and Esfahan. It also hit a petrochemical complex in Mahshahr.
Yesterday, the Iranian terror regime violated the ceasefire after 2 months. It opened fire and launched toward Israel. We attacked the petrochemical complex in Mahshahr in southwestern Iran. In this complex, materials and components essential to the regime's missile program were produced.
In response, Iran struck a petrochemical facility in Haifa. It's also targeted 2 Israeli air bases, but many of the interceptions were above the occupied West Bank, over Palestinian homes. The escalation is pulling in other regional actors.
The Yemeni armed forces affirm the following. First, we declare a complete and total ban on Israeli maritime navigation in the Red Sea, and we consider all enemy movements to be legitimate military targets for our armed forces from the moment that this statement is issued.
US President Donald Trump told Israel and Iran to immediately stop attacking each other, insisting a diplomatic solution is still viable. Julie Dager, Al Jazeera.
Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has warned that any future Iranian attacks will be met with what he called full force.
Right
now, the fire at the front is contained because after we hit the terrorist regime in Tehran, it stopped attacking us. If it makes the mistake and attacks us again, we will respond forcefully. Because Israel has a full right to self-defense and we exercise it to the extent necessary. I say this to you as I say it with appreciation and respect in my good conversations with my friend, President Trump.
And strikes have not stopped entirely. Air raid sirens sounded in the Israeli city Eilat within just the last hour. The Israeli military saying it intercepted a suspicious aerial target from Yemen. That's what it looks like. Eilat is Israel's southernmost city and home to its only port on the Red Sea. Houthi leaders have declared a ban on Israeli shipping through the al-Mandeb Strait. That's the southern exit of the Red Sea, which is a significant trade route for the country. Phyllis Bennis is a fellow at the Institute for Policy Studies and an international advisor for the Jewish Voice for Peace. Phyllis, you're joining us from Washington, D.C. Let's start with the words of the U.S. president to the Israeli prime minister, as reported by Axios, quote, "Be careful or you'll be on your own very soon." That's Donald Trump to Benjamin Netanyahu. You told me this is not as significant as it might appear. Why?
I think the words could be significant if they were matched by actions. What we see now are a set of words, "you better be careful, you'll find yourself acting alone," that are not backed up by actions. As long as the United States continues to send tens of billions of dollars to Israel, as it has since the genocide began against Gaza back in October of 2023, and as long as they're sending billions of dollars directly to the Israeli military, and as long as they're protecting Israel from being held accountable in the International Court of Justice or the International Criminal Court, as long as those actions don't change, the words just don't mean very much. This is very much the same thing that we saw during the first years of the genocide under President Biden and then later under President Trump, where they would say, please stop killing so many Palestinians, but continuing to send virtually unlimited bombs and bombers and weapons of all sorts, as well as huge amounts of money from the US taxpayers. As long as that continues, there's really no reason that Netanyahu should assume that he has to worry about the words that sound very good to a US domestic audience.
I want to bring Iran into this. Yesterday on Sunday, Iran assessed that it was in its best interest to launch a ballistic missile strike on Israel, which has by far the strongest army and fighting force in the region, one of the strongest in the world. What does that tell you?
Well, I think one of the things that it said is that Iran wants to be taken seriously when it says we have red lines. One of the red lines is that any ceasefire that's signed off on between the US and Iran must include, and with Israel's involvement as well, it must include a ceasefire in Lebanon. It must prevent Israel from continuing its assault on South Lebanon, but that particularly an assault on Beirut, on the capital of Lebanon, or the suburbs of Beirut, is a red line. And they had said that before. This was not something new. The Israelis had gone ahead earlier and had attacked, through that, ignoring that red line, had attacked the southern suburbs of Beirut. And now Iran was saying, you know what, we're serious about it, and we're going to show you that we're serious. So I think that's what we were really seeing in that Iranian response to the Israeli action.
How is Israel...
The question of how far it will go, we don't know.
Well, that was going to be my question. How is Israel going to have to factor that in? Because I suppose you could make the argument that Israel intercepted Iran's missiles, that Iran didn't do damage. But then the counter argument to that is that Israel does now have to, Israel is aware now, Israel must know that if it carries out a certain level of offensive action against Hezbollah, it's probably going to expose itself or make itself susceptible to new Iranian attacks.
That's absolutely right. And I think that what we're looking at is both sides are trying to assess how to be taken seriously and at the same time not be more provocative than they need to be. The Iranians were very careful. They used, I think it was 11 missiles. All of them were intercepted. There were no casualties. That's a good thing. If there had been, the Israeli government might have felt compelled to go even further than they did. So they're showing that they can control the amount of weaponry, but that they are not going to simply sit back and abide by somebody else's word that you better be careful. That both sides, as Trump said the other day, both sides have to stop shooting, as if they were sort of in the OK corral or something like that. But nonetheless, he was targeting both sides at that moment, but in a way that could not be taken seriously because it was not matched by actions. That's what undermines certainly Trump's words on all of this. And it sets up a situation where the question of including Lebanon in any serious region-wide ceasefire has to be taken up, has to be taken seriously. We don't know yet about the question of including Palestine, even just Gaza, where the genocide continues. There were 13 people more in Gaza killed yesterday, one of them an 8-year-old boy. This is going on a daily basis. And we have not yet heard from the Iranians that they are demanding that. We certainly haven't heard it from Trump, that he is demanding that there be an extension of a real ceasefire. The ceasefire that is supposed to be underway in Gaza has never been underway. There has never been a stop to the genocide that has gone on since October of 2023. So as long as those regional crises continue, I think it's very unlikely that we're going to see any kind of a serious and lasting ceasefire, even if it's limited to just stop firing, reopen the Strait of Hormuz, and we'll deal with all the rest later. Even if it was that narrow, I'm not sure that we can accomplish it until there is a serious acceptance that there has to be a regional move as well.
One of the U.S.'s war goals against Iran was precisely to weaken Tehran's support for regional allies, such as Hezbollah. In the last 24 hours, as we've said, Iran took the unprecedented step of initiating a strike against Israel. Is that a U.S.-owned goal after 100-plus days of military engagement in the region?
You know, it's not clear to me what the U.S. goals ever really were. I think we heard dozens of different goals. Some of them had been achieved. You know, the massive destruction of Iran's navy, yes, but it still has enough of a navy to keep the Strait of Hormuz shut because it doesn't need a full-size navy to do that. We also saw in the last 24 hours the engagement of the Houthi militants in Yemen. Another grouping that has some backing from Iran. They're not a puppet of Iran, but they certainly are identified and supported by Iran. If they intend to continue attacking Israeli forces around the Red Sea, this could create a whole new level, a new front, if you will, of this military assault that's going on at a regional level. So it just comes back to the notion that there has to be a regional solution here. It's not going to be enough to have the U.S. and Iran sign off on a ceasefire deal of their own, allowing Israel to go ahead and continue to escalate its occupation of South.
It looks like we just lost the audio connection there. Phyllis Bennis, fellow at the Institute for Policy Studies, thank you very much.